Morning. It's Friday, January 5th, and this morning I want to talk about Greg Abbott and Texas. I'm not a big fan of Greg Abbott and his stupidity and his actions on the border. His actions with shipping immigrants around the countries without notifying. I think it's a great idea to have shipped them around the country, but I don't think it's an idea that you send them out sneakily in the middle of the night and dump them on places where they're not prepared for it. I think that's almost a crime. And then putting out barriers in the water that can potentially hurt or drown people is another thing that I consider poor on the part of Greg Abbott and the citizens. Well, I don't know if the citizens in Texas are in favor of him. The population is 40% Mexican, so I don't know how this guy manages to stay in power. I don't know where he's getting his votes from. Maybe many of the Mexicans aren't allowed to vote in some way, shape, or form. In any event, the border is a serious problem, and Greg Abbott has now taken an action on the border by creating a law, a Texas law. And what he has done has been now attacked by the Biden administration. On Wednesday, the Biden administration sued Texas over its controversial immigration law that gives local law enforcement the authority to arrest immigrants, migrants, or whatever you want to call them, arguing that the state cannot run its own immigration system. The lawsuit marks the second legal action taken against Texas this week as President Biden and Republican Governor Greg Abbott spar over the handling of the U.S.-Mexico border. The first law that Abbott put into existence, so to speak, was called Senate Bill 4, and it gave judges in Texas the ability to issue orders to remove people from the United States. And the White House has slammed that law, which is supposed to take effect in March. They declared it incredibly extreme, but they did not say it was illegal. They did not say that a state has the right to deport people. So I don't know how this thing has gotten passed. Well, it got passed in Texas. States are allowed to deport people under certain conditions, but there are several states that are trying to write new laws to allow them to deport people under consideration and without any real substantial information, stuff like that. But in any event, even if those laws are written and if they're passed by Congress, Biden will veto them for sure. So while it's legal for a state to deport people, mass deportations are going to be another animal, and we'll have to wait and see what happens. But right now, anything that's passed by the Republican Congress is sure to be vetoed by Biden. So right now, Texas has put its foot in the wrong place, so to speak, because the Associate Attorney General, Benita Gupta, clearly stated that this law, SB 4, is clearly unconstitutional, and it's under the supremacy clause of the Constitution, and long-standing Supreme Court precedent clearly states that states cannot adopt immigration laws that interfere with the framework enacted by Congress. So the Justice Department will continue to fulfill its obligations, its responsibility to uphold the Constitution and enforce federal law. Some TV stations have asked Abbott to comment on that, but so far he hasn't responded to their requests. So I'm sure most of you remember that Texas put razor wire in the river to keep the immigrants from crossing. And Biden wants to have those razor wires removed. And the Biden administration asked the Supreme Court to allow it to remove the razor wire that was installed by Texas. And the claim is to whether or not the Border Patrol had legal authority to cut the concertina wire on the banks of the Rio Grande. And what does anybody think about whether or not Texas has the authority to put such razor wire in the water? And Texas, of course, sued to stop the wire cutting, saying it illegally destroys state property and undermines security in order to assist migrants in crossing the border. And a federal appeals court ordered the Border Patrol agents to stop the practice of removing the wire while the court proceedings play out. And the Justice Department has now filed an emergency application asking the Supreme Court to overturn that decision. Now, I thought it was a done deal. I thought the razor wires were gone. I thought that if the federal government decided you can't put razor wire in the river on the borders, that was the end of it. But no, because we are the great democracy that we are, things like that have to go to court, and then they go to court, and then they go to court, and then they end up in the Supreme Court. And this is a dangerous act at Texas. It's an act where they're putting weapons in the war. I think it's a disgrace that we can't get rid of those razor wires. And now we have Congress who jumps into the mix. And the House Republicans said they will forge ahead with steps to impeach the Secretary of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, over his handling of the border crisis. Now, what did he do that was incorrect? He's not the one that put razor wire in the water. He's not the one that's carrying on. He's not the one that's shipping immigrants all over the country. So why do the Republicans in the House think Mayorkas should be impeached? Maybe they should take a good hard look at the actions of Abbott and worry more about him than about Mayorkas. And the other thing Congress should do is stop worrying and do something about it. Get together and come up with some reasonable law that will put this villainous situation with the immigrants in the proper perspective and have some control over it. Some law, some methodology that has escaped us. Let's go back to sponsoring. Let us not keep foundering and making assholes of ourselves and allowing a huge asshole like Abbott to put people's lives in danger. Is this the way we want to solve a problem? I say no. This is a problem that must be solved with compromise, a word that does no longer exist in the government of the United States vocabulary. So I'll leave you with that this morning. Have a great day. Bye.